So, for all of you out there, I'd like to welcome you to Thursdays with Terry webinar. Tonight, along with our friend, Women's National Team Coach Terry Steiner, we have with us soon, soon we have with us, some call him the natural, I call him the man, Randy Couture. I mean, he's freaking, it's awesome. It's awesome to have him. So before he gets on, let me do a couple commercials here. First, I'd like to thank Ambit Energy and Team Global Energy for making this webinar possible. And as usual, we have Coach Frank Baumgardner. He'll continue to keep us on track, keep us rolling, help monitor the questions you might have. So if you have a topic, you have a question, there's going to be a lot of interesting stuff going around today. You know, Randy's got a lot of great things to talk about. You know, when we're talking about the training stuff, there's things to ask. Just chat, put them in the chat bar. We will get to as many as we possibly can. And the nice part about this, like you saw, Frank was going through, and you can click on those and go back and hear the things again. All right, and you can, like, for Chosen Suffering for Tom Ryan, that website, I believe, is on that version, that taped version. I think we put it in the chat bar where you can get that book. And I know that we're going to be talking about stuff like that again today, the mental toughness part with Randy, the working through stuff. And so it's all connected. So until Randy gets on, Coach, we ended with meditation and visualization. We started talking about moving through, and you want to pick it up from there?
Well, I think it's a good place to start, right? It's the one thing that it's maybe the only thing that we really have total control over, right? Is our mind and how we handle situations and how we move forward from setbacks and disappointments and frustration. I mean, and that's really where life is made won and lost, right? Wrestling matches are won and lost. Not what happens to us, but how we deal with it, right? And being able to control the thoughts that are in your mind and that you allow in, and to start, you know, driving around your mind. I mean, that's an important part of it, not letting your mind wander, right? And that, you'll notice, you know, it was funny because just the other day we were out for a team workout, and it was a conditioning workout, and, you know, being an old guy like I am, you know, you don't put yourself in those dark clouds anymore, right? Where you know, I like enjoying life, right? And so all of a sudden you're in the middle of a sprint or a few sprints, and your mind starts wandering really quickly when it's fatigued, right? About why am I doing this? What am I doing? You know, I mean, I still don't know why I'm doing it, but just from the standpoint of, you know, when you're in a wrestling match and you need to stay focused, or in any tough situation where you need to have laser focus, right? You can't let your mind wander like that. And fatigue does that to all of us, right?
What's up, guys?
Hey,
Randy.
And so I think controlling that and being able to control your mind within tough situations, and when fatigue does start setting in, I mean, that's a huge part of it, right? When we get throwing something on our desk that we don't like from the boss, and all of a sudden, you know, something's happening bad in our life, you need to be able to control your mind and how you react to that situation, right? And a lot of times, if you've never been in those tough situations, it's hard to react the same way, right? But that's the one thing that you have to be able to do, and really the only time to really focus on it and work on it is in the tough situations. When the sun is shining, right, everyone can control their mind and the situation and what's happening. But when it gets ugly out and fatigue starts setting in, and can you control it in the tense situations and the tough situations? And I'm sure Randy has more to add on that. I'm sure when you're in the middle of the ring as the UFC fighter and someone rocks you, to collect yourself back and to maintain some focus on what the task at hand is, that's probably not an easy thing to do. But those are the things that's going to make or break you in those situations, or in life when life rocks you with something, right? And so you have to be able to control your mind and the thoughts going in and out of it.
Yeah, and before Randy jumps in on that, I want to give him a proper introduction because,
Okay.
like I said, some call him the natural, I call him the man. Army Sergeant, thank you for your service. UFC champion, movie star, 3-time All-American, 2-time NCAA runner-up, 5-time world team member. You're an extraordinary man, and your accomplishments are amazing, buddy. And you got 40 more good years ahead of you. I mean, look at you. Are you kidding me? No, so you can jump in on what Terry was just talking about, and then I want to go back to your journey, okay?
Absolutely, yeah. I think what Terry is talking about is very important, and I think we will dive into more about mental skills and all those sorts of things to deal with the adversity of competition, or those same skills translate to life, just like Terry was saying. You got to go ask for a raise. You have a disagreement with your significant other. Those are things that you can visualize about and prepare yourself mentally as well as physically for, so that you get the outcomes that you want. Terry's talking about getting rocked in the cage. I think coming up with that key phrase that your cornerman or your coach knows, that person that's there, your support system. You get clipped, you get a wobble, or you're not executing the things you've trained to execute. Having that key phrase that refocuses you and recenters you in the heat of combat is very important. And that can be on a wrestling mat or in a cage in MMA, but something that refocuses you on exactly what you trained to do. Now, if there was a flaw in your training and you weren't preparing the right things, or something unanticipated happens, that's a whole different scenario. You still have to stay focused and get through that and adapt. But if things are going how you thought they might go and you get clipped, or you get taken down or scored on, getting back to what put you in the dance in the first place, having that phrase that they know that gets you. For me, it was as simple as move your feet, move your feet, move your feet. As long as I had my feet moving, I got into a groove and got things moving in my ways. I planted my feet and kind of stationary there, then a lot of times that's when bad things happen. So a lot of times it was as simple as getting me to move my feet that got me refocused and re-engaged in trying to do what I knew to do to win the fight.
Awesome. So let's go back. Oh, sorry.
1 second. Isn't that kind of the same as back when you were in the military and military training? I mean, they're not preparing you for the easy situations that you can just walk in and secure a field or secure something. They're training you for the situations that do throw you obstacles, that do throw you
Absolutely.
and toughness, and
you
have to maintain some focus, right?
Obviously, I was never in combat, but I think that's why the Army teaches things the way they teach things. It's simple, it's by the numbers, so that under pressure or under fire, you can still execute those things. Those things are ingrained in you. Some of that's not much fun, but you learn it so that you don't have to think about it so much in the heat of the moment. You can execute it in a simple fashion and get the job done still.
So for high school people out there and high school coaches, the same routine might not be the best plan, throwing obstacles in the way, so they have to change in the middle of the course, make it a little uncomfortable for them. Is that something that's important in the training?
I think you want to mimic competition as much as you can in the training environment. If I'm training for a 5-round championship fight, then all my practice, all my training is going to simulate that 25 minutes with those 1-minute breaks. The same with my strength and conditioning. It's going to emulate the duration of the time I need to be out there competing and being successful. I think having that ritual, that best case scenario, you got all the time you need to warm up, go through all the physical things that put you in that mental place to go out and execute what you've trained to do. That's your A warm up. You got all the time in the world to execute that 20 or 30-minute warm up and get everything firing, get your lungs opened up, your heart pumping, and get everything flowing, both mentally and physically. And then you need to come up with that B routine. The car broke down and you show up late and you got to run in the gym and now your name's being called. You still have to go out there and perform. So you better have that shorter version that still gets you in that same place to go out there and be successful and do what you trained to do. Not let that unravel you and walk into a match or a fight not ready to go. So having that shorter version, when things get jammed up or things don't go the way you expect them to go, you can still get in that space between your head and physically go out and do what you trained to do.
Right. So let's go back. Let's talk about your journey. Start with your wrestling. I know you started early. Give us some break.
I know it's been an interesting journey, honestly. I got into wrestling. One of my best friend's older brothers were wrestling. We were in 6th grade. We were grade schoolers. They didn't have a wrestling program in the grade school up in the Seattle area where I grew up. I grew up in a single-parent household. I was the oldest of 3 kids. My dad was never around. He never paid support. He was never very supportive of anything. But I'd always heard what a tough wrestler he was and what a tough guy he was through his stint in the Navy and all the other stuff. So somewhere in my young mind, I believed if I turned out for the wrestling team, I would get his attention. He would show up. He would come to watch me wrestle because it was something that he did. That didn't work. He didn't see me wrestle one single match in my entire wrestling career, which was the span of almost 40 years, I think.
Yeah, right.
But I found my vocation. I found my calling, that thing that made me tick, that place where I felt the most comfortable. Those were where my friends were. Those coaches were very important people to me. When I needed a kick in the ass, they were the guys that step up and give me that kick in the ass. When I needed someone to throw their arm around me and say, hey, it's going to be all right. You did the best you could. They were those guys too. They became, in a lot of ways, those father figures, that influence for me. And I seemed to thrive in that environment, in that sweaty mat room, grinding it out and learning the technique and the tactics and getting myself in shape to go out there. And never more vulnerable than walking out in the center of that mat or walking those 4 steps up into the center of that cage. There is never more vulnerable place to be. And at the same time, you're never more alive. You can feel every single hair on your body in those moments. And that's a great place to be. So I found that, by accident, largely. And it turned out, as a small kid, I wanted to be an Olympic skier. I ended up on a wrestling mat. So junior high school, I'm still friends with my junior high school coach to this day. He's a great guy. He was a huge influence on me. He taught me the passion and the love for the sport. And I think that's where it's got to start. You're willing to do all kinds of things to chase that passion, to try and be the best and fulfill your dream in the sport that you love. So, that's what leads us on the mat and grind out those practices and do all the other stuff that we need to do. I carried on through high school. I finally set a goal. Instead of just kind of doing the sport, I decided my junior year, after having a little bit of success wrestling up 2 weight classes, that when I got back to my real weight class at 168, I was going to win it. And I made the goal to, everybody makes that goal, right? Everybody wants to be the state champion, right? So I talked to my mom. I said, Mom, look, I know I got to pay car insurance and gas for that car that gets me to and from school and to and from work, but I really want to make a push to be a state champion this year. I want to quit my job so I can focus on training through the winter months and doing what I think I need to do to do that. And she said, you know what? I'll go with that. You show me that you're willing to put that effort in. I'll pay your car insurance and I'll pay that gas during those months until the state championship. And so that's what happened my senior year. I set out writing down the road map. You wouldn't go from here to Dallas without a map. So why the hell do you think you're going to go from where you're standing to a state championship without a map? You better draw a map. Draw all those details and all those things that are going to get you to that destination. And then don't forget about those small steps along the way.
Amen.
Being a state champion rolls off the tongue pretty easily for just about anybody. So getting down to brass tacks and calculating those small steps and all the things you need to do to get there is another thing. So write it out. And it always sounds good in your head when you're writing it down. And then you get to executing it, and you have to be willing to adapt, be honest. I've written out many a training camp for a fight and then got halfway through it and going, man, I need a damn break. What was I thinking? Writing this out, I'm killing myself. So training smart rather than hard, something I had to learn by experience as well. I think I was classically overtrained for a lot of my matches at the highest level. And I don't think that's something I recognized until I started fighting and happened to train for a 25-minute fight, not just a 6-minute match or a 7-minute match. So tempering that training, being smart about it, rest. The recovery period is just as important as that time that you spend on the mat grinding it out or in the strength and conditioning room, shoring up those other pieces. So you have to kind of want to be a student of the game. Draw out that map, do your best, pull in all the resources that you have to facilitate putting yourself in the best position to win. No guarantee that's going to happen, but you do the best that you can, and then wherever the chips fall, you can live with that. You can walk away with that knowing you did the best you could. I've been in some of the biggest matches, both in wrestling and fighting, that you can be in, and walked away from half of those not happy.
Right.
Not on the right end of it.
We didn't have quite that many, but go ahead. Yeah.
The sun still comes up the next day. The people that really matter, the people that really care about you, don't care whether you win or lose. And so that's what you have to focus on. That's what you have to stay true to. That old saying, anybody that cares about that doesn't matter, and the ones that matter don't care about that stuff. I mean, that's how it is.
So then you went to the service.
Right along with that, I mean, I think that what Randy said about having a plan, I think it's so important, right? I mean, you have to have a plan, but then I think smart enough and wise enough to know when that plan needs to be adjusted, right? And I think that that's where sometimes we, even as coaches, right, we get so caught up in, well, this is the plan, right? This is what we laid out. But the thing is, when you're writing a plan out, you're not thinking about the variables involved. You're not thinking about, you're dealing with human beings that are all different and all react different and have different variables in their life that's going to also affect that plan. And so it's having an intuition to be able to change the plan when needed, right? And so, yeah, is it science? Yeah, there's definitely a science to training and being in shape and, being able to withstand stress. But there's also the intuition. You have to have the intuition to be able to change that and be wise enough to know when that is, to change the plan when it's called for, right?
Absolutely. I think that can be the hardest thing sometimes, to be, to learn to listen to your body, learn to listen to your coaches or your training partners, because a lot of times on the outside of things, they can see things a little more clearly than you can in the heat of it and in the middle of it. So that there's definitely so many things in this sport that are sports of, it comes with experience, right? The more experience, the more times we put ourselves out there, the more we start to figure out what works for us and what puts us in that place to go out, do exactly what it is we set our goal to do and what we trained to do.
Right. Right. So I know we talked this week, and I know Terry mentioned, because you guys were at Oregon State together, right? Coaching.
That's right.
Yeah. And was that the Olympic trials you're going through? I know there's heartbreak for all of us. There's heartbreak in our sport just because, you want to get there and you might not reach there, and there's only a few that get up there. But how did those kind of things help motivate you? Because, I mean, you've had so many successes. I mean, I just listed a very short list of them. And motivation.
Well, I think motivation is never a real issue when you're pursuing something you're very passionate about. You always want to go. Sometimes you have to learn to pull yourself back, like Terry was talking about, adjust the plan and not just go gung-ho straight. We have a tendency, certainly as wrestlers in a wrestler's mindset, to, oh, you want me to run through that wall? Okay, I'll run through that wall. I mean, that may not be the best thing for you. So, again, training smart. But, yeah, those are some devastating, quadrennium's a long time to train for something. And in 92 and 96, I was the #1 guy in my weight class. Everybody expected me to make the team and win the medal. And I managed in both of those trials to come up short, to lose when it really counted. And, pretty devastating to reset, but you have to use those setbacks as motivation. Those times when I lost were the most important times in my life, both in fighting and in wrestling. That's what forced me to really analyze what I was doing, really analyze where I went wrong, where I could do better, where I would be ultimately a better athlete, or and at the end of the day, a better man. For me, I mean, if we go to wrestling, I was losing some matches at the high level by 1 point. Get one gut wrench, you get turned. And you know how politics plays into anything, but you can't let that referee or those mat officials get into your head or affect the way you perform. And so you get called for passivity. We as Americans hate that because we know we're working as hard as we can work. I mean, that's part of our style in a lot of ways. We may not have, especially in Greco, we may not have some of the tactics or technique down that some of these guys that have been doing it since they were 4 have, but by God, we will find a way to outwork you and make you go harder than you want to go. So to get called for passivity and then get put in a position of disadvantage was a big disconnect for me. I was frustrated and pissed off at that referee and that mat judge for calling me for passivity when I knew I wasn't being passive. But I let that affect me. Didn't matter. They made the call and they're going to do what they're going to do. Right. And maybe they're going to call that guy next if no score happens. So instead of getting pissed off and frustrated, now I get down in the parterre and I'm thinking about, he called me for passivity, and I'm not thinking about what I need to do next. I'm still thinking in the past about, damn it, I got called for passivity. Right. And next thing you know, I'm getting turned for a point or 2 points. And that's the difference in the match, literally at the highest level. So working with sports psychologists, you want to talk about those mental skills, reframing that situation. I know in my heart I wasn't being passive, but they're going to call one guy or the other. And guess what? 9 times out of 10, it's going to be the American because they see us as a bunch of spoiled rich kids, which, is nothing true in that statement, but that's how they see us. So instead of being pissed off that I'm going to get called for passivity or that I got called for passivity, that fired me up even more. Oh yeah, come on. I'm good here. I've worked here. Give me your best shot. I'm going to beat you here right now in parterre 2 and win this match when I get my shot on top. And just simply by changing that frame around that same situation, I started winning those matches instead of losing them. Simply by changing and making that little tweak in my head. I
hope the high school coaches and the kids on this call hear that, because that's so important. That's so important.
It's all about what you think in here. Your coach can think you're the best guy in the world, but if inside that little voice in your head is telling you something else and you're believing that voice, it doesn't matter what that coach says to you. That's where you're at. So unless you learn to control that crazy ass roommate in our head and realize that we control him, he doesn't control us, things change when you make that step, when you step behind that voice. Let him chatter. Let him say all the things he's going to say. Oh, this guy's full of shit. What's he talking about? He's probably talking to you right now. Step behind that voice. Let him say what he's going to say. You get to choose what you react to. You get to stop it if you want and give it positive, affirmative things to say that are goal-oriented and to keep you on track and on task for the match coming up. Or you can let it talk you into, oh man, I got tired. Maybe I should have run more sprints. And you'll be over there running more sprints if you listen to that voice, right? You don't need to run more sprints. Certainly not at that stage of the game.
Right.
So learning to control that self-talk, that crazy roommate that we all have,
crazy roommate,
is a huge part of the mental skills puzzle. Again, I feel so fortunate through wrestling on the national team to have gotten exposed to a sports psychologist and learn a lot of these tools. And when I transitioned to MMA, not a lot of guys had that experience or that exposure. I ended up doing visualization exercises and counseling, if you will, talking to a lot of my fighter buddies that were training partners for me that had never been exposed to any of that, and watching them unwind that and start to plug in or not plug in to that voice and see it change their ability to go out and compete and deal with the adversity of walking out in the center of that mat or walking those 4 steps up into that cage in front of thousands of people sometimes, was a remarkable thing to see. It's very powerful.
Yeah, that's awesome. You know what? Frank, you're going to go to commercial. Randy, when we come back, it's going to be about 1 minute and 15 seconds. When we come back, I want to talk about your commitment to your foundations and the servicemen and women. Okay, so that's where we're going to head. Go ahead, Frank.
Hey, folks, it's Rich Bender here at USA Wrestling. We hope that everybody out there is staying safe and healthy. Thanks for taking the time to get on the webinar with Coach Steiner today. I hope the information he gives you will be helpful as we all deal with the pandemic and how we can keep focused and make the most of this time. Our partnership with Ambit Energy provides unique opportunities for USA Wrestling members to save money on their energy bills and possibly even generate funds for the wrestling program. If you want to learn more about how you can get involved, Coach Steiner will give you that information. Thanks again, and stay safe and healthy and focused.
Hi, my name is Todd Valley. I'm a recently retired wrestling coach. I've coached 40 years from the elementary to high school level, either as an assistant or as a head coach. I served 25 years with the Indiana State Wrestling Association, 13 years as a kids director, 5 years as the vice chair of the organization, 5 as the women's director. About 4 years ago, Olympic coach Terry Steiner showed us and introduced us to Ambit Energy and showed us how we could save a little bit of money on a gas bill we were already paying. And if we referred 15 friends and family, we could possibly get it for free. In a short amount of time, we were able to do that. And for about 3 years now, we've been getting our gas supply for free. Since then, all right, we introduced an Amish guy to the same program. And he has a woodworking factory, and he was able to start saving money on a gas bill he was already paying. And since then, referred friends and family, and now he gets his gas for free. He just was real excited this week when he got his gas bill. It was $948.58 for the gas portion of the bill. Ambit Energy sent him a check, all right, for the exact same amount, $948.58. And what's really great is the Penn Wrestling Club, where I was coaching at, gets a little piece of all those gas bills for all those friends and family that we recommended the savings to. So it's been quite amazing for us. It's been quite amazing for my buddy who has a woodworking factory, and quite amazing for the Penn Wrestling Club.
So as we have, obviously a phenomenal opportunity tonight with Randy on, we really appreciate everybody spending the time, each Thursday night being with us here. And this isn't possible without the partnership that we have with Team Global Energy, USA Wrestling, and Ambit Energy. Okay, so next week we're going to have Coach Dan Gable on. We talked to him this morning. It's going to be an outstanding call again. So, make sure you guys register for that one. Then after that, 2 weeks from now, we'll have Olympic medalist, world champ Clarissa Chun on. And then we will also, hopefully next week, we'll have a really big announcement as well. Alex is working on the next speaker also. So, make sure you guys are staying on teamglobalenergy.com. I'll put it in the chat. You can get in, become members, have access to all of these webinars that we've done, not only tonight with Randy's, but all of the ones in the past, free of charge. And also you can start learning more about this partnership that's not only creating this webinar, but it's creating opportunities financially for the national team and local organizations.
And if you know somebody that might be interested in the past ones and this one tonight, just have them sign up. They'll have access.
Mm-hmm.
So back to the man.
Well, first of all, I see a question from Hannah Arledge about preparation for a big match or a tournament.
Okay.
And that goes back to drawing that map. Most training camps for me for fights were 10 weeks. I knew what on the date I was fighting. I knew what fight night was. So I know the day before I've got to weigh in. And now from that point back, I will work my way back. That 7 days from fight night, 7 days out, that's my last hard workout. Now all I have to worry about in that last week is keeping the tools sharp, keeping the things that I'm want to execute and that I need to watch out for against that opponent sharp as I go through that week of recovery. Obviously, I still have to make weight if I'm fighting at 205 or 198 when I was wrestling at 198 or 213. So you know, keeping my weight management and my diet and nutrition under control during that rest week especially. But I need those legs and that spirit to come back. There's the grind of training can run you down. If you overtrain, you're going to get sick. I mean, there's a few ways to monitor that and kind of decide if you're overtrained and need some active rest or real rest. But drawing out that map from 2 months out, okay, I know when camp is starting to fight night. Again, I go from fight night all the way back. So big match, all the way back to where I'm sitting at the table writing it all down on that blank calendar. That's the map. Now I have other maps from other competitions. Some were successful, some weren't. I can compare those. What did I do in this one that made me feel so good and I had such a great outing? What was the difference between that one and this one where I didn't win or I didn't have the outing I wanted? I can compare those and you start to tweak and do that training log, do that map that you drew up. You start to see what things seem to fit you and work for you to deal with the adversity of competition, to get yourself both physically and mentally prepared to go out there and kick ass, to do what you set out to do. So Hannah, drawing that map is real important. And then listening to your coaches, being able, like Terry said, to tweak it, you know, listen to your body a little bit. And you know the days where you just need to suck it up and you need somebody to kick you in the butt. And you know the days where you're really run down and you maybe need a half a day off or rest. So you have to be honest. You have to have people around you that are going to be honest and let you know where you're headed and how things look. So I think that's real important. You know, this may be an individual sport, both fighting and wrestling, but it's still a team. You still got a bunch of guys that you train with every single day, and you're only going to be as good as those guys you're hanging out with. And if you're the big fish in that pond, you need to start looking at getting into a bigger pond. Because if you're kicking everybody's ass on the mat and in practice, there's a fair chance you're not getting any better. You're not progressing tactically and technically, and you better start finding some guys to challenge you. I always felt like in fighting, if I wouldn't get tapped out or punched or kicked in the training environment, I wasn't getting any better. I need that adversity. That's what brings change. That's what forces you to examine what you're doing. So I think that's an important piece of the puzzle, is getting that right team, that right measure of guys that are going to kick the shit out of you versus guys that you're going to be able to execute a lot of things that you're training to do. You need that mix and that balance.
Right. Fantastic. And you've said a couple times now, be honest. You got to be honest, whether it's getting criticism or self-criticizing. Coach Steiner, anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think what he said was spot on. I think, you know, that's the importance of journaling and keeping record, right? And of what you're doing, because just like Randy said, you know, when you're putting things together and you're putting a plan together, you've got to have some resources to go back to. You know, what worked last time, what didn't work last time, because chances are you were successful or unsuccessful for a reason, right? It didn't just happen by chance. And so to be able to, you know, have those journals and having things written down that you can go back to and use as a resource to make your plan better and better as time goes on is you know, it's imperative. You have to have that, right? Otherwise, you know, you just keep making the same mistakes over and over and over, right? And it's not how you move forward, and that's not how you climb the ladder of success, right? You have to learn from your own mistakes. Hopefully you can learn from someone else's mistakes, but you for sure have to learn from your own mistakes, right? And so it really is imperative that you start keeping track. And I think so many times athletes, they leave it in the hands of their coaches. Well, the coach is doing a general plan for a team more than likely, right? I mean, plan, and there may be some specifics for certain individuals, but you have to start to be your own coach. And the minute that happens, the better off everyone is, right? When you start to take control of your own career and your own journey, you start to have some say in how that's going, and because you know yourself better than anyone, and you can feel yourself and feel your body better than anyone can feel that and understand what you're going through. And everyone is different, so there is no perfect plan, right, that someone can put forward. but you can make your plan a lot closer to what your needs are if you're paying attention to the details of it, right? And so that's really what you want to do, because you have to put yourself in stressful situations, right? Those are the stressful situations, the times, like Randy said, you get tapped out, or the time on the wrestling mat when you're getting taken down and taken down and taken. Those are the times that's when we do look in deeper, you know. I'd like to think that we learn just as much from the win than the loss, but chances are when we lose, we dig deeper and we look deeper inside to the cracks in the armor, right? And if we're winning, even if we're winning wrong, sometimes we don't catch that, right? But when we lose, you could be doing 99% of the things right, but you'll find that one thing that why you lost that match or why you lost that situation. Those are the things you have to correct, right? And so having a plan, having a journal, writing those things down is imperative for success, long-term success.
So I see there's a couple more questions, but I really want to get to this. I feel it's extremely important. And here we're 40 minutes in, and I haven't picked on Terry yet. I haven't made fun of you, Terry. This man, I'm off my game. I don't know what to do here. Okay. So anyway, let's go back. Sorry, Terry.
You're remiss. You're being remiss in your duties there.
What the heck, man? Randy, let's talk about your commitment to your foundations and our servicemen and women and the athletes that you just give us a talk.
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess back to the start, and there's some lessons in this part of my journey too. You know, I was a one-time state champ from Seattle, Washington at 168 pounds, didn't get much college. You know, I never went to the junior nationals. I never got recruited really by any major universities. I walked on at Washington State for a semester. One thing led to another. I get a phone call. I dated the same gal my whole senior year. She calls me up. Hey, I'm pregnant. You know, what are we going to do? And I'm in my freshman year, first semester at Washington State. I'm like, like I said, I had a dad that wasn't around. He was a deadbeat, and that wasn't going to be me. So everything else went to the wayside. I said, let's get married. I joined the United States Army as a way to support a brand new family coming on. Spent 6 years in that uniform, very formative time in my life from the age of 19 to 25 years old. And I think it was, I thought wrestling was done for me. So any of you out there, let that be a lesson to you. Keep it in your pants. Don't, it's straight up simple, that changed the course of my life in a lot of ways. And it turned out great. I ended up where I wanted to end up, or where I thought I would end up, but you just never know. And a family is a very serious thing. So I had a new family on the way. My first duty station was in Germany. At the time, there were 5 million soldiers stationed in Central Europe in the peak of the Cold War. So I ended up wrestling. They had a huge wrestling program there. I ended up winning a championship. I had never wrestled freestyle or Greco as a scholastic athlete. So both those styles were new to me, but obviously freestyle, I wasn't afraid of that because it was a lot more akin to folk style wrestling. I ended up accidentally on a Greco mat, and the rest is, and ended up really focusing on that style because the military had a inter-service championships and all these things. And I think it was in that period, in that 6 years, that I started to get the confidence to believe I could compete at that level, at that international level. I don't think I had that coming out of high school. And so especially those 4 or 5 years I wrestled for the Army and ultimately became an alternate for the 88 Olympic team as a soldier, were very important in my journey. I then went to Oklahoma State. This was around the same time that Terry and Troy were both wrestling for Iowa. So we saw each other across the mat. Sometimes it was fun for me, and sometimes it was fun for them. It just depended on the night. But I think it was there at Oklahoma State I got the confidence, not that I could just compete, but I could win at that level. And again, steps on the ladder. The journey is always constantly trying to move forward, stay focused. I lost in the NCAA finals twice, in my junior and my senior year. Huge. I mean, that's a very elite group of guys that wins an NCAA championship. And I was right there, 5-3 against Keesaw in my junior year. Lost lost to Mark Kerr my senior year. Was lucky I didn't get pinned in that match. It was pretty damn close, but was behind the 8 ball, 5 points back right from the jump. So that led me to getting the job at Oregon State and coaching. And I think one of the things that helped me most in understanding who I was as an athlete was coaching others.
Right.
When I had to break down my technique and how I made things work and pass that along to somebody else that was aspiring or younger and trying to learn stuff too, that really solidified in my mind how I executed those things. And I think there's a lot of top athletes that don't know how they do the things they do. They just do them. And so I think being forced to coach at Oklahoma State during summer camps and stuff, and then going into Oregon State as the assistant wrestling coach, working with Terry and Troy and their perceptions, their perspectives, those were all opportunities for me to learn and break things down. And I had to then turn around and hand that off to other people. So that was very, very important. And I think I became a better athlete through that coaching experience. I found myself fighting at 33, almost 34 years old, probably by most people's estimation already over the hill in a combative sport. But I still, because of those losses, because I'd lost in those Olympic trials in 92 and 96, because I'd been in the finals at the NCAAs and dropped those matches, lost those matches, I was still on fire. I was still motivated. I still wanted to compete and succeed. And that mindset led me into MMA. And I got to transfer and apply all those mental skills and all those physical gifts that I developed through years and years and years of wrestling into mixed martial arts. That put me in the public eye almost immediately. And I knew my life had changed. I went to Costco after my first UFC to get some supplies. And this guy melts down, runs up and buys a 9-pack of Instamatic cameras and is almost in tears so he can pull one out and take a picture with me. And I was just flabbergasted. I was like, what the hell just happened? I couldn't believe it. Oddly enough, that guy just reached out to me last week on social media. He still has that picture, and his family still teases him about buying that pack of cameras to take one picture with me. Odd how things come full circle. But obviously, after 14 years of fighting, I find myself in a little bit different position in life. I had some amazing success as a professional athlete, which is, I think, a very unique thing in our society. And that gave me the opportunity and a platform to give back to those guys that are wearing that same uniform and taking that oath that I took at 19 years old. And a lot of those guys aren't coming back. And some of them made pretty significant sacrifices, even when they do come back. So those are the guys I wanted to set out to help. I did all that training. I took that same oath. It was a Cold War. I never had to put my ass on the line. And since 9/11, we've had a whole bunch of guys and gals do just that. So it became my mission to try and give back to some of these guys and help them in their transition back to the civilian world. And there's a couple of different foundations I'm involved with to do that. I founded my own to help those guys that have been wounded in combat and that were stuck in the hospital, getting fitted for prosthetics, getting surgeries, learning to walk again, all that stuff. And so I wanted to take if we could take one thing off their plate in that process, take finances off their plate. I heard horror stories about cars and locked up in parking garages, wives losing houses and losing jobs. I mean, it's crazy. So we started raising some awareness and raising some funds to help those guys and gals that were in that transitional state after being wounded in combat. And then we started training a bunch of pro ball players using combatives like wrestling and MMA to make better football players, make better hockey players. Again, a lot of it's right here. It's not that we're teaching them a bunch of physical things that translate. And football is certainly a combative sport. Most of those guys don't look at it that way, but it's a combative sport. So changing their perception about what conditioning is and what real combat is. When you get a guy chest to chest and make him hand fight and go 3-minute goes or 5-minute goes, it changes. And these are the best athletes supposedly in our country that walk onto a professional football field or one of these other professional sports, and they get a minute into a grind match or a pummel match, and they're running out the door to puke because they can't take it. That's how I measure their character. The guy that comes right back out in on the mat and is ready to go again, that's the guy I want to work with. And the guy that takes the rest of the go off and doesn't want to get back on the mat because he just puked, forget that guy. You're on your own. Show me you want to be here and that you want to learn from this experience. So I get a chance now to get back those pro ball players and pro athletes, because I wore both of those uniforms, struggle with the same transition, whether they've been wounded or not. That transition is unique and difficult. They're very unique people. How many people reach that level in athletics or reach that level in as a soldier? You take that oath and you do that training and you actually put your life on the line in combat. There's adrenaline. There's all kinds of things that all similarities between the two groups of people. And there's a mutual respect between the two groups of people. So it made sense to create a foundation that would get these two groups of people together, first to train and sweat together, because to a man, they say, oh, you should have seen me when I was in uniform. I was in great shape. Now look at me. Everybody, age catches up with just about everybody, and they let themselves go. So get them sweating again. That sweating and training together, even though they don't know each other, breaks down those barriers and creates a connection that's very unique. Some of our best friends are the people that we sweated with and trained with and bled with all these years. I mean, I have a list of guys that I've trained with all these years that are still my best friends to this day. And we're long since those days of grinding it out. But that connection is strong, very strong. So we train, and then we sit down and give them a chance to talk, be vulnerable. It's a safe setting. We all speak the same language. We're all struggling with the same transitions. So creating that place where they can let those demons out, talk about those, the VA, their wife, whatever it is that's on their back and that's bothering them and that's plaguing them, let that stuff out and let it out in the light of day, because most of those demons don't like the light of day. And then there's that guy across the mat that you just trained with that say, oh yeah, I was in that situation. This is how I got through it. This is what helped me. Oh, you're homeless and you need a place to live or a job here. Connect with this guy. This guy might be able to help you out. I mean, it just becomes this grassroots peer-on-peer counseling thing that's way more powerful than some psychologist from Stanford telling you that you're messed up from your time on the field or you're messed up from your time in combat. They're not messed up. They're special.
Yeah,
So
amen.
changing that narrative and getting them to look at it differently. Again, that frame around that circumstance, look at it a little different. Wear those scars with pride. You think I want to change these or get rid of these? Hell no. I worked hard for those.
There's the badge right there.
Yeah. So, and each and every one of those guys, whether they've been in combat and wounded or on that ball field and have those same scars, wear those with pride because you earn them and that makes you a special individual. You should walk into the room knowing that in your heart, that you're a special person. So I think that's been a very powerful thing. The MVP, vetsandplayers.org is that organization where we get these guys together. Extreme Couture GI Foundation is the foundation. We put on small events. Friends of mine from the wrestling community help. Mark Bam Pastelnik, him and I won national titles in Greco the same year. He's throwing events up in Quad Cities where he's from. Dave Miricatani's done a bunch of events in the St. Louis area. My gym staff and friends here in Vegas, we put on events here. We got a guy up in Washington where I grew up that does some events and stuff for us there. And all that money goes to helping those guys that have been wounded take the financial pressure off of them. So that's been a big part of my life as I've gotten older and finding a way to give back, finding a new purpose, a way to be of service. That's why I took that oath at 19, was to be of service. And now I get a chance to be of service in a different way.
That is flat out awesome. And I know Frank has placed those websites in the chat bar so everybody can refer back to them and find them and support those causes. But Randy, if you just say it slow again for those of us that can't read, we'll do it.
So, xcgif.org, that's Extreme Couture GI Foundation.org. And the other one is MVP, but the website is vetsandplayers.org. So you can find our schedule for the events that we throw for those two organizations. If you're a vet or a retired athlete, we're doing all the meetings by Zoom right now until this COVID crap settles down. You can join us, get on a Zoom call with us. You can get the meeting ID and all that stuff from those websites for Vets and Players for the MVP.
Fan-freaking-tastic. Now, I know, Frank, we're going to get to some questions now, and but I think, Randy, you came up with a great T-shirt. Demons don't like the light of day. Okay? I'm just saying, brother. Okay? Every time you sell one, though, you got to give me 2 cents. Okay, put it towards the charity. Frank, question.
Yeah. So, got some good ones here. Let's go with Alex. So, I want to pick that one first because you just talk so passionately about your foundations and the vets and the work that you're doing and your journey and everything. So obviously you've had some success in everything that you've done. What has been your motivator to continue to work as hard as you have and be as successful as what you have, knowing that you were a world champion? Okay, so you're a world champion. What motivated you to go win 2, 3, 4?
Well, that's funny because when we talked about this the other day, everybody was like, "Oh my gosh, you won 6 world titles." I'm like, "Yeah, well, that means I lost it at least 5 times. What the hell?" And I do. I have my fight record is 19-11, and like I said, the fight that I'm most proud of was the Nogueira fight in Portland, Oregon. I lost. I didn't win that fight, but by God, it was a knockdown, drag-out fight. And I executed everything I trained to do throughout. And there are a lot of guys that wouldn't have made it out of that first or that second round. So I think, again, embracing the grind, embracing that adversity. Nobody likes to lose. We do everything we know how to do not to lose. But it's not the end of the world. The sun's still coming up. And that's the opportunity to learn, to figure out how to do better, how to get better. I never watched the fights I won. Who cares? I got the outcome I wanted, but I studied every one of those ones I lost ad nauseum. So that was my opportunity, my place to figure things out and make adjustments and get better and become a better athlete and ultimately, I think, a better person. And I think looking through those wrestlers' eyes at every single problem, and this is something I wish I'd have figured out in my personal life a lot sooner. But all the mental skills that we've developed as wrestlers walking out on that mat. I mean, think about the first time you walked out on a wrestling mat. I can remember I was 11 years old, wearing a pair of tights and a singlet, walking out into the middle of a mat in a gymnasium full of my peers at 11. Who the hell cares if you win or lose? That's enough right there. Talk about courage. So, it's not always about winning or losing. Obviously, we do everything we know how to do to put ourselves in a position to win. But that adversity and sometimes that losing is just as important, and you have to embrace that, and you cannot shy away from that. Make friends with it. Make friends with the worst possible outcome. And if the worst thing that ever happens to you in your life is you lost a wrestling match, you're doing pretty damn good. So keep it in perspective, stay positive, and learn from that adversity, learn from those opportunities to make adjustments and to become better. I think that's what it's all about.
Yeah, and like Randy said, failure is a part of it, right? It's a part of the process. It's a part of learning, and finding the silver lining in every situation, right? Finding something positive to take from every bad situation. If losing is a bad situation, right? Of course we want to win, but there's so much to take from every situation, and whether you win or lose, it's moving forward. Are you moving forward from the situations you're put in? Are you going to be better the next day because of what happened today? And that's the ultimate, sign. When you can start doing that and framing success in a different way and keeping control of yourself mentally in between the ears, that's when you're getting somewhere, right? And not letting every situation, every loss, every bad practice, not letting every one of those affect you so bad that you're down in the dumps. You've got to maintain a levelness and to learn from those situations, right? And not be drugged down from them. So, and it's a hard thing to do. I think I really struggled with it as a young athlete, right? Not to let those losses really hurt you and take you down to a different level. Right, and you need to learn to just be even keel more and not ride that roller coaster ride with wins and losses. So.
Yeah, big thing that helped me, and this is when I realized as I transitioned from fighting, from wrestling, I started fighting in 1997. I was, obviously lost in the final trials in 96. Then the sport of MMA came along. I still decided I was going to go another quadrennium and try and make the 2000 team. I was still highly ranked. I still went on to win, a national title in 97, the same year that I started fighting. Made the world team again, and was still in the hunt for that 2000 spot at 213. And somebody asked me at a seminar, an MMA seminar, what do you get more nervous for, a wrestling match or a fight? And it was a stark, kind of interesting question in my mind. And I was like, man, honestly, I get way more keyed up and way more nervous and we'll talk about that term in a second, but for a wrestling match, which seems counterintuitive. You could be walking into a cage and get kicked right in the face, yet walking out on a wrestling mat, I was more keyed up and hyped up about that match. And I think because of those losses, because of losing in the finals twice, because of losing in the 92 and 96 final trials twice, I was so hyper intense and hard on myself that walking out and fighting was fun. It was like, and I had to think about, why did I get into wrestling? Because it was fun, and bring the fun back into what I was doing. And it wasn't life or death if I lost this match. I'd already lost. I'd been in those matches and lost. So why was I still being so hard on myself? And why was I so keyed up and nervous, if you will? And then I recognized, well, hell, I'm walking out to fight in a cage and I'm smiling and having a good time. Why am I not walking out on the wrestling mat that same way? What was going on? It forced me to really kind of dig in mentally to what was the difference between, because of that question. And it boils down to nervousness versus excitement. If you think about the physical attributes you assign to nervous, your head goes down, you're like, oh man, I'm really nervous. And it implies right away in that word that something bad might happen or something bad is happening. And I had to dissect that and think about that. And I thought, you know what? I'm not nervous about walking out for this fight at all, even though I could get knocked the hell out. I'm not nervous at all. I'm excited. And a lot of those same physical attributes, the butterflies in the stomach and having to pee 5 times before you put your uniform on and all of that, all those same things that you apply to being nervous about something, which has a negative implication in my mind, and being excited about something. They're very, very similar. Sweaty palms, maybe cotton mouth, all those things you can associate with both of those frames, both of those labels for that circumstance. And it's way healthier to be excited about something. It was my opportunity to walk out there in front of 20,000 people and show them all the things I've been training and learning to do, getting ready to solve the problem of that guy across the cage from me. That's exciting to me. There's no nervousness involved. Smiling to be there, showing everybody how hard I worked and how much I've learned to go out and figure this out. So just in changing from nervousness to excitement, change that label, change that framework, it takes a whole bunch of pressure off you, and you're going to enjoy the sport a whole bunch more. Like I said, if the worst thing that ever happens to you is you lose a wrestling match or a fight, you're doing pretty damn good.
Amen. And I imagine that whole process, that whole thought process too, has really elevated your coaching ability, because you can bring that to the forefront for them as well. So that's where
you see just as many coaches, and Terry can attribute this. I mean, he's probably hoarse and has lost his voice by the end of a weekend of a good tournament. I was the same way, because you're so invested in your athletes and what you hope they're going to accomplish. And so recognizing that in your demeanor and how you approach your athletes too, you can create, or diminish the moment and what's going on too. So, and recognizing it in myself, I then recognized that I always needed to speak in the positive. And I remember a specific match with Chad Renner, and you might remember this match, Terry, but Chad was winning late in the third period. All he had to do was keep being aggressive, and I can't remember what I said, don't do this. And exactly when you speak in the negative, it's exactly, he's going to execute exactly that, and it ends up losing the match. And it was a poignant reminder for me as a coach to always stay positive. Tell an athlete what you want him to do. Never use negatives. because they don't, your subconscious brain doesn't filter those out. It doesn't get the don't part. It's just going to do what it heard.
You
Right?
said
So,
do. You
so
said, you didn't hear don't. You didn't hear don't. Hey, Frank, give us another question.
All right, so this comes from Callie here. So you've got some young wrestlers that are heading to college, or any athlete right now. It doesn't have to be just that, but obviously we've got this prolonged period with the stay-at-home orders. And this individual's looking to face new levels of competition. Moving to the high school or to the college level, whatever it might be. So if you're going to be a coach to that specific individual, where do you start with them right now?
Right now, you get them doing some form of fitness, active rest training and fitness. They can do push-ups, they can run, they can get on an Airdyne bike if they have access to one. They may not be able to get one in the gym, but there are plenty of ways to adapt and stay physically active, even though we have to say, stay physically distant from each other. We can still stay physically active. Now, Terry and Troy had it made. He had a twin right there. He could beat the hell out of on the carpet. It didn't matter. We all don't have that luxury of a built-in workout partner, but you can still stay active. You can still find things to do. You can still study tape. You can still look at technique and tactics and visualize. You're going to have just as much physical response to those pictures you put in your brain as almost as much as actually being on the mat and executing those things. So there's still a lot of things you can do, even though we're kind of hampered by social distancing.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, the thing you have control over is your physical conditioning, right? And maybe it's weight management and making sure when you step on that campus, you are going to the next level. It's going to be a different kind of a challenge for you. So you can just go in most prepared, right? The most prepared you can be. Maybe you're behind in technical skills and in tactics and things like that, but you can always go in better shape than anyone in that room, right? You can always be the most conditioned athlete in that room, whether you're a freshman or a senior, right? It doesn't matter. You have control over that. So I would really focus on the things that you can control, and those things will also bring you confidence, knowing that you prepared through the summer the best that you can, and you walk in there with a good set of lungs on you. You walk in, you're lean and mean. I mean, that's going to give you some confidence that you're going to need, right? Because there's going to be people coming after you at a different level than you've maybe been around before. So you're going to need some kind of confidence going in and giving yourself some kind of a leg up, right? So, control the things you can control.
So one of the things that I know both of you have talked about in different ways is your plan, your training plan. Randy, you called it the roadmap. So, obviously we've got a very different situation right now, but just your particular roadmap, you don't have to go into full detail because it might take hours and hours, but what were some of the things, some of the details that you put on your roadmap when it came to training?
For me, again, like I said, I would start on match night or the start of the tournament, or for me, it was fight night. Step back. That for me, if you're younger, then maybe you'll get away with a 3-day or a 4 or 5 day taper, where you're not doing a lot of hard wrestling or a lot of hard training in that period, letting your body recover. And that's when that little voice will really start going crazy, because competition is getting closer, and now you feel like you're not grinding it out. You're not on the mats killing yourself. And that voice will start to go, oh my gosh, it'll try to encourage you to keep working and to keep doing things. And you really need to let your body recover so that on match night or fight night, when it counts, you've got your legs under you and your body is fully recovered and ready to execute the training and the technique and the tactics that you've trained it to do. And then as I got older, obviously I was already old when I started this whole thing. So it was a 7-day tape for me. 7 days, that week, I'm still active, still moving, still in there doing light sparring, some grappling, specific situations, because every single person you face poses a set of problems. Sometimes they're tall. Sometimes they're really strong. Sometimes they're really flexible or really fast. Those are physical problems. They have specific techniques and backgrounds. Really good at this, not so good at that. So obviously I need to find ways to be aware of what he's good at so I can counter those things or stay out of those situations and figure out how to get myself in the situations where he doesn't seem to be as good, where he doesn't seem to be as strong, doesn't like to be. And now I've put myself in the best situation, the best opportunity to win that match, to win that fight. And then I fashion my camp and get the right partners to simulate those circumstances, both where he's good, worst case scenario, he catches you where he's good. You still have to survive that. You still have to get through that situation because at the end of the day, I'm still going to beat this sumbitch. So, and then I'm going to put myself in those situations where, you know, I feel I am strong and put him in a position of disadvantage. And obviously those are the areas that, and it's easy to focus on those because they're fun, but it's easy to let that other go by the wayside. And then the next thing you know, you find yourself in that worst case scenario and you haven't prepared. So I always wanted to prepare for a worst case scenario. If Tito Ortiz took me down, chances are I'm going to be eating elbows. He won 95+% of his fights that way. So I was in scrambles trying to take me down and trying to put me on the bottom and never conceding those situations. Because I knew if Tito couldn't take me down, he had a very low chance that he was going to be able to beat me. You know, that's one instance where I fashioned the camp and got the right guys in there to sharpen those particular tools for that opponent. That becomes a little more challenging when you're talking about a wrestling and a tournament. You don't know who's going to advance. Yeah, so that, you know, and I was part of those teams where I wasn't the number one guy. So I went to Barcelona and took video and filled out scouting reports for those guys that were advancing in the tournament so that the American knew who he was fighting or wrestling next and had an idea. Well, he got scored on this way. He scored on his opponent this way and this way. This is where he seems to like to be, and he's pretty good at this move and that move. He got tired near the end of the match. So these are all things that you can factor into walking out on that mat and giving that guy the go in the next match, solving that problem. So I fashioned my roadmap, if you will, to take into account those worst case scenarios. If some bitch calls me for passivity and puts me on the bottom, I better be able to deal with this guy's reverse lift or his laced ankle or whatever that tactic or technique is. I need to be able to endure that and come through that with minimal damage and then put myself in those positions to score and be effective as we move forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, no, absolutely.
I know we're going a little long, but this is fantastic stuff. So Frank, you got one more question up there that I really think we should get to.
Yeah. So it's kind of inspired by Alex's Olaf mug there. I mean, I'll have to get that for my daughter. She's big on Frozen right now.
Hey, dude, come on. Come on. Just watch Frozen 2. Got to bring it out, brothers. Got to bring it out.
Hey, own it. Own it. Don't deny it at all, man. All right. So Juan asked, so he's a high school coach, said they provide food for their wrestling, for the wrestlers during matches and tournaments. What do you suggest that we provide for them? And then he made sure to put in there, note, no one's cutting more than just a couple pounds. So they're not cutting big weight, but just looking at nutrition wise, you know, competition, what would you suggest?
Yeah, you know, I've always tried to keep that pretty simple. I was never one of those guys that was going to measure a bunch of stuff or weigh a bunch of stuff or do a bunch of meal prep, you know, to get me through the week. We all kind of know what good food and bad food is. I mean, if it's processed to stay on a shelf for more than a couple of weeks, it's probably not good for you. There's probably all kinds of crap in there that's not good for you. So whole foods, you know, real foods, processed or not processed, but prepared properly. It's not rocket science. I think we need a balance. Obviously, glucose and complex carbohydrates are very important as you're going into a tournament. Fruits and simple sugars during the course of that tournament to keep your energy level high. Avoid the high sugary stuff because you're going to have that sugar peak, but then you're going to crash just about as hard as that peak was. So, I certainly try to keep it as simple as possible because at the end of the day, it's a lifestyle. I don't want to just go into this fad of oh, I got to cut all this weight and I'm going to do all these crazy things to get my body weight down, get down and be able to make weight, and then go back to drinking the beer and eating the Big Macs and all the other crap that you kind of, some people do in the interim. I think you keep it simple and you can do it over the long haul, over the course of your life, whether you're getting ready for competition or not. And it keeps you lean. And, you know, especially as we're younger, we tend to have these big peaks and valleys. You're either celebrating or commiserating, depending on how the tournament went. And then you don't really get back to the groove for a couple of weeks until the next competition is staring you in the face. And I think that was one of the things that allowed me the longevity I had in fighting, is that I learned through my younger days of those peaks and valleys, those valleys and those peaks are where the injuries occur. And the more steady I kept my fitness level, then when it was time to peak, that peak was a lot less stressful on my body, and that peak tended to be a lot higher. And what you put in your body, you're trying to run a Ferrari, so you better not put shitty oil and shitty gas in that Ferrari, or it's not going to run very fast or for very long. So you think of that car, that body that you have, that's the only one you're going to get your entire life, by the way. So you better put good stuff in it. Cut out the sodas, cut out the sugary crap, cut out the processed crap, eat as much whole, real food as you can. If you're not incorporating some greens, this is a water-based system, and it runs on alkalinity and acidity. The more stress we put under, the more crappy foods we put in it, the more we train, the more acidity rises in your body. We've heard of lactic acid from doing too many squats or working out too hard. The counter to that is base, greens, alkaline foods, alkaline water. You don't get some ionized water or some high pH water. Anything green is high in alkalinity and counters all that acidity that we tend to build up from training, from the stress, and some of, you got to live a little, right? Sometimes you're going to cheat. You're going to have the cookies or the ice cream. I mean, that's going to happen. So putting that high pH alkaline stuff in the system really counteracts a lot of that. And you'll find you don't get sore. You'll be able to train harder for longer periods of time. Again, that's a simple general answer to the question. But I think simple is good because you can execute that over the long haul.
Yeah, I just think that the thing with that, I mean, that was great stuff, Randy. And I think with that, what Randy said, a lot of especially young athletes, right? Disciplined up until weigh-ins. And then it all goes out the window, right? You see them after weigh-ins, they're throwing everything in their mouth and they're stuffing their bellies, and they get out on the mat, they can't even wrestle. They can't even move because they put so much and too much. Your body's only going to absorb so much at a time, right? And so knowing the amounts of food you're putting back into it, I've seen it so many times after weigh-ins where, all of a sudden discipline is out the window. It was like winning the first match, right? And now they're throwing everything in their system, and all of a sudden they get out on the competition mat and they can't move. So I think just having that discipline throughout the competition, if you're going to let go and not have some discipline, it's got to be after the competition, and then go out and have your cheeseburger or whatever you're going to have, something like that. I mean, but during the competition, you've got to stick to fuel. What's going to fuel your body? It's not what tastes good. Who cares about taste? You're there for a purpose of winning a match. It's fueling your system, right? And so that's, you got to look at the things that are going to fuel your system, like Randy talked about, having discipline through that process.
Well, gentlemen, I couldn't be more thrilled. What a fantastic evening. Thank you, people, for getting on. We had a nice group. Terry, as always, fantastic job. Randy, man, I could listen to you for days, brother. No, this is awesome, and I hope people come back on and look in the chat bar and get to your foundations and support, because the wrestling community, that's what we do, and God bless you for reaching out and helping those folks. Any closing remarks, John?
No, I just want to thank Randy for being on the call tonight and thanking you for being the person that you are, and the the service that you continue to give to our country, and the people that you've been close to and around your foundations. I mean, it's just a great thing, and it's been a great time sharing with you, and good luck with everything down the road. And thanks to Frank and Alex for keeping the show running smooth. And I'd just like to, for the people out there, again, invite your friends, invite some other people. Next week's going to be a great call with Coach Gable. He's a man that has so much wisdom, and I was lucky enough to be around him for 6 years of my life, very close on a day-to-day basis, and we had a pre-call this morning with him and went over some things, and there's so much wisdom there, and he's willing to open up. At his age, he wants to pass that on to the next generation and coaches and everyone out there, and there's so much to learn from. So I encourage you to jump on with that, and also remember the purpose of these calls is to give you knowledge, but it's also to help our USA Wrestling national teams. And so Frank is going to put in the chat box a few sites where you can go to if you're interested in becoming a part of the team, and you can gain some things yourself from that, and becoming a partner in the business platform that is our sponsor, Ambit Energy. Look at that, and also if you want to just come on and put your energy bill forward and help the national teams that way, and there's no cost to it, no tie to it, and we'd love to have that as well. So we appreciate your support. We appreciate your attendance every week, and we're looking forward to a great week next week. But again, Randy, thank you for everything you've done and the person you are.
Yeah, without a doubt. And one last shout out to Clarissa Chun, our world champion and Olympic bronze medalist, who will be on the week after Coach. See, it was strategic. We had Randy and then Coach Gable, but then we have you, Clarissa. Then we have you. Not a hard act to follow. No, it's going to be great. Thanks again, Frank. Thank you, gentlemen. Fantastic. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
See ya.